The KRGS Doors Show, proudly brought to you by KRGS Doors. For all your shopfront roller shutters, roller grills, folding closures and bifold doors, visit www.krgsdoors.com.au. Welcome to the KRGS Doors Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Blackman. The aim of our podcast is to talk to cool people with cool stories, whether it be our suppliers, customers, staff, other business owners, or people from different walks of life, and get to know them a bit better. If you're interested in coming on, drop us a line or email, or connect with us via Facebook, and we can have a chat to see what we can do. Today on episode 32 of the 18-month-old KRGS Doors podcast, I'm joined by KRGS Doors Managing Director Clayton Blackman and Grant Hartley from Brand Local. Brand Local is helping businesses make informed marketing decisions. Grant is recognised as one of the world's leading authorities when it comes to Google. Grant has been a speaker with Google and local government and was instrumental in setting up Google's trusted agencies in Australia and New Zealand. I will let you in on our next episode's guest also, but for now, please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Grant Hartley.
If this doesn't turn you on, folks, you haven't got a switch.
Grant, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. What is the Grant Hartley story?
Well, the Hartley story, I guess, from a business context, I guess I started, I think one of the questions you were talking about earlier was how you started, and I started really in the magazine industry. I was a designer for Woman's Day, Woman's Weekly, those magazines, so it was all print back in the day. And then I kind of progressed into radio and TV, and then obviously digital took the digital or the marketing space by storm. So it was a natural progression to get into, or progression, I should say, to get into digital. And basically from there, I really was in the web development space and really identified, I guess, as digital progressed, that a lot of businesses, it became, I sort of refer to it as the digital providers are sometimes the mechanics of the digital space. So a lot of businesses don't really know what's going on and get taken advantage of. And I started doing seminars and got involved with Google, and I spoke on stage with Google. Kind of really started to get a little bit annoyed that businesses were kind of spending money in areas they didn't have to spend. So I started this education business, which is Brand Local, primarily education, and really kind of trying to educate businesses on what areas they're best to spend their money, rather than kind of like spending it in areas that make, I guess, the providers more money than it does the business at the end of the day. So really that's the direction that we're heading in with Brand Local now, and really just trying to give businesses that education to make informed decisions where they spend their money, because really small businesses don't have a lot of money, and they certainly don't have a lot of time to sort of do research. So it's been really well received, and we're really ramping up on the webinar side, and it's very popular.
Yeah, a lot of small businesses, mate, they want bang for their buck. They want to be able to stretch their dollar, as you know.
Yeah, look, I think too, one of the frustrating things I found when I first got in is that businesses, particularly small businesses, they need to actually spend money to get a result. If they spend a little bit, it's very hard to get a result. So really what you've got to do, I think, with small businesses, and I've started a lot of small businesses, so I'm passionate about that area, is you've really got to show them, it's okay to spend money, but you've got to spend money in a way that it gives return progressively as you do it. Yeah. And that really builds confidence along the way, because businesses have to spend money to progress. If they don't do that, and a lot of businesses, if they spend their own time, they're ultimately spending money and they're taking time out of their business. So the key really is to sort of educate businesses on how to look at marketing as an investment rather than a spend, and really just trying to do that spray and pray method or listening to other people. They've really got to be informed. So that's really the approach that I'm taking, is really trying to equip businesses to be self-sufficient and to be making informed decisions. So, ultimately that's been the biggest frustration, is that trying to get businesses to recognise they have to spend money, but at the same time it's, I guess, my job, and should be everyone else's job, to actually get them a return progressively and show them it's an investment.
It's the old saying, you got to spend money to make money.
Well, you have to. And I think the biggest cost, I always say, is doing nothing, because really the way things are progressing, it's like you're still on an escalator, you're going to go backwards. So you have to do something, but you've got to, particularly if you've got a small budget and not a lot of time, you've got to make the right decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing is too that they're not experts in that field, that they're experts in their own small business. So they're not 100% sure on, and it's a bit like when you go to the car mechanic, that he tells you, oh, you need to replace your radiator or you need to do this. You have to trust them, because you're not the expert in that field.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the problem now, particularly with digital, is what I see is the trend really with digital is that everybody kind of is so familiar with social media or so familiar with search, because we use it every day, that we kind of can, make the mistake thinking that, or business can make the mistake thinking that it's easy, that, I'm familiar with this environment. So they go off and they market, they come up with an idea. But one of the things, if you're in marketing and you're doing marketing, particularly with businesses, they need to understand people. They have to understand platform as well as they understand their product. And nearly every business, and not all businesses, but nearly every business understands their product or service at a very deep level. And that really what they need to do is understand people and also platform, because you're really, and I always say too, if you're B2B or B2C, you're always in H to H. And H to H is human to human. So you really need to understand how humans respond to certain messages and things like that. And that really is something or a skill that's acquired over many, many years. So, it's one of the things I always advocate, that it's a very good decision to have a coach, particularly in marketing, because it allows you to learn from other people's experience and it gets you results faster. And coming back to what I said before, it's investing some money, but making sure that return is coming on the back of that spend. So you're not spending 10,000 on a website, you're spending 500 and you're getting 1,000 return, and you're spending progressively and making money as you go. So I think a coach, a lot of small businesses think that's a costly approach, but time and time again, I've proven that it actually is a very smart way to go.
Just on that human-to-human element, I sat in on one of your webinars last week, and you did say that exact same line, and then also you said about being on page one of Google's fantastic, but if you're not getting the people to buy your product, it's a waste of time.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions too, and it's this old cliche of, people say, I want to get to number one. And the thing is that to get to number one's easy, really. I mean, all you got to do is pay for Google Ads and you get to number one. But the thing is, most businesses that use Google Ads fail because they don't have a conversion strategy. And the issue is, particularly in the digital space, and it's like anything. I mean, one of the greatest assets I have, and I was explaining to a guy the other day, is I sort of come from the generation pre-digital. And then I've also dived right into digital, right through into AI, and I'm really, deep into that I can actually sort of standing on the corner of the building, if you like. I can see down one side of the old way and I can see down the other side of the new way. And a lot of the younger generation are only seeing one side of the building as such. And really being able to utilise that understanding of how people responded and reacted in that kind of physical offline presence really gives you an understanding about how people and humans respond to certain messages. And I always say to people, if you're going to be in marketing and you're selling a product, go out and physically sell it face-to-face and understand how people respond to certain messages and understand people and how they interact, or what problems your product solves and what challenges they have. And I think really when you get on page one of Google, that's great, you're visible, but that's only the very, 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 very first part. You've got to be visible, you've got to engage them, you've got to get them to commit, and you've got to do this in seconds. You've got to do it really, really quickly. So you need to really be offering value. And one of the most compelling things is that 72%, according to Small Biz Trends, 72% of businesses don't use call to action. So they're not really leveraging that seconds journey to get people to make a commitment. And when I say commitment, it's either providing their details to download something or to get something, or making a purchase. So that's where you can be number one with a very, very poor call to action or conversion strategy, and you'll fail 100% of the time. I'd rather be number 6 in search with a fantastic conversion strategy, and you'll win the game every time. So number one isn't the end game.
I remember one of the things I was taught, because I've been in sales for a long time, and it's not about selling the product, it's about selling yourself.
100%. And again, this comes back to the H to H concept. Is it's really selling. When you start to look at what boxes need to be ticked in terms of someone making a purchase in a consumer. A consumer decision-making process is obviously they have to first determine they need something. And again, a disclaimer on that is that's not always the case, or infomercials would never work.
Yeah.
But usually it's that they have to decide that they have a problem. They need to find a problem. The problem might be that they're busy, not spending enough time with the kids, need a holiday, but there's always a problem. There's always a need not being met or a challenge. Then they have to go through the process of then going through and understanding that they trust you, that you can actually solve that problem, and obviously that the product is going to actually solve the problem as well. And the problem is a lot of people lead with product, but you really should be leading with people and leading with that problem. So the other thing I think a lot of businesses make a mistake is, and I'm a sales guy through and through, I think really that's my kind of passion too, is I love people, so I really love the connection, human connection aspect. So from a sales perspective, I always say, you can wear a $10,000 suit, but I should be able to outsell you in a pair of board shorts.
Yeah.
So really, it shouldn't matter. You don't need a $10,000 website to convert. You can have a $100 landing page. It's all about how you approach meeting that client and that human need or that objection or commitment or problem that the consumer has.
Yeah, one of the things I did notice, Grant, over the COVID time, which lucky enough, we weren't really affected by it. We didn't have any days off or shut down or anything in our time. But I noticed with our customers that we deal with in the construction and building and shop fitting, not necessarily the human-to-human, face-to-face, but it was over the phone. And people had time to have a chat, or people wanted to have a chat and talk about business and different things, you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things that sort of helped us through our time was that selling, not so much face-to-face, but the H-to-H was still there because you were talking to them over the phone and they had a lot of time for that.
I think a lot of things changed in COVID. I think that really people... I was involved in the bushfires down my way many years ago, and nothing brings people together like a disaster or something that's actually happening. People start to come together. Everyone comes out of their houses. Everyone's got time to talk, and the next thing the fire's put out a week later, no one talks to each other. I think that really during COVID, that human connection, people felt isolated. Yeah, and I think that using that, and I think that was really probably what underpinned that a lot. But COVID really did change a lot of things, even in terms of Zoom calls. I even notice now that our webinars, we're getting a much larger response to the webinars because people are actually set up to...
They're used to it too now, mate.
That's 100%. So that's really changed things. And you'll find that even with AI, it's accelerated AI and it's accelerated a lot of things in the digital space that will only be cumulative, just really expand and grow and rapidly change the whole environment. So we're set for some huge changes in terms of sales and how we communicate. It's not going to be that personal handshake thing anymore. Yeah. It's really going to be able to do things digitally, using things like video, using live video, pre-recorded video. Yeah.
Similar to what we're doing now.
Definitely.
Now, tell us about Brand Local. What type of business is it? When did you start the company? The number of employees you have?
Well, basically, Brand Local really evolved from other companies that I had, and we really... It took on that name around about 3 or 4 years ago when we started to move more into education. So prior to that, we're really a production-based company where we developed content strategy, landing pages, platform integration, where we did things like integrating fully automated, platforms from taking e-commerce payments through to integrated product delivery, e-product delivery. But it was mainly production-based company, and now we kind of sit on both sides. But I had about 30 people working for me at one point, but we outsource a lot now because obviously the way things are, we can outsource within the country, outside, internationally, and it's very easy to bring together virtual teams to do work, and it's very efficient. You get a higher grade, high quality people, and you can tap into those resources as required, so it's more efficient for the business. So we still do handle a lot of production, and I do most of the strategy plans and basically brief the teams on what needs to be done. But my focus really is, and I think a passion that I've really found is that I'm really passionate about the education side and developing those programs to help small business to, as I said earlier, to really identify the directions they need to go so they can make informed decisions. So that really, about 8 years ago, we started to get approached by local government. So we're developing a lot of education programs for local government. So that's really an area that keeps me busy, and I find I'm happier in that area because I really like to I get to speak to a lot of different businesses as opposed to all the developers. So
and a variety of people.
It's great. Yeah, I like it. It's good.
You also do work with Google. Tell us about that role and how important Google is to small business.
Well, yeah, with Google, I was doing seminars early days, say about 10 years ago, and in terms of early days in this journey down the Google line. And Google My Business came out to Australia and launched around 2015, and we launched, I launched the first Google trusted agency in Australia with a guy called Leo Ruyu. And we launched that. That was the first agency, and then that's when we started to get the invites from Google to speak with them on stage to explain, content and content strategy, because Google's very technical, so they're very difficult to understand. So they talk very much in that technical language. And, I've sat through a lot of their webinars and seminars, and small businesses really don't get it. And also, too, Google's very silo-oriented. So if you have a speaker come out from Google, they're talking about just their department and how that works. So really, I spoke on stage with Google for a while there, and then I branched out really and thought there has to be something different in terms of really putting this in plain speak for businesses, but not just sort of talking in these silos. It's about saying, well, this is what you need to do here, and not having really any allegiance to any particular product that I'm trying to sell. Is just really trying to sell the business on the fact that you don't have to go one way. There's ultimately there's a lot of ways to get to where you want to get to, and I think businesses really needed that. So I branched out really with Brand Local, and that's what we're developing really with the education side. And if you read the reviews on Google, it's good to hear too that a lot of businesses are saying that they feel that the information is delivered in a very plain and practical and easy step-by-step process. So that's exactly what we're aiming to do.
That is 100% right. As I mentioned, I sat in on the webinar last week, and just little things that, how simple is that could have an impact on the business going forward, such as on the Google My Business side of things, as an example, making sure all your details are correct right across the board. That has an effect on where you sit on Google and things like that. There's such an easy fix, but people don't know about it because it's not their expertise.
It's absolutely crazy when you think about too that Google is really, you look at the order in which you should do things. Google should be number one. It's the largest marketplace in the world. Not only that, people, and according to Google's insights for brands in 2021, that 78% of people will go to Google to do research on you before they engage with you. So really, to build authority in Google and have a very professional profile should be the number one priority for businesses. But even looking at platforms, and I think where a lot of businesses do go wrong, and I see this as probably one of the biggest problems that I see where businesses go wrong, is they're hunting for new business all of the time. And I've spoken to businesses and almost fallen off my chair when I've looked at their database and segmented their database and had a look at what they've actually spent years and years and thousands of dollars building, and they're not farming those databases. So they're always looking outward to bring people into the business. So they're always looking for that new hit, that new customer.
Rather than concentrating on the existing.
They don't. And another thing that blows me away is I've spent a lot of money with a lot of different companies, and I've never ever once been asked to give a referral. I've never been once asked to recommend somebody who, and for a lot of the businesses I deal with, I would. So that's just one example, but there's so many areas that businesses can actually look into that gold mine that sits within their actual databases.
Yeah.
100%. I spoke to a guy who was he had a local tapas bar. And he was about to spend $15,000. I don't know whether I mentioned this in the webinar, but he was going to spend $5,000 a month. He was just about to sign this with a digital marketing agency. And I had a look at it. I said, look, I tell you what, I'll act as your marketing manager for the day. You buy me lunch, I'll be your marketing manager for a day, and I'll sit in on the meeting. So I sat in on the meeting and I asked the questions, and the proposal, honestly, it looked like it had been written by a child. It was horrible. There was nothing about Google in it. There was no KPIs. There was nothing in it that actually was structurally. It was just like, we're just going to create content and see what happens.
So you saved him 15 grand.
15 grand. So what we did is I said, well, give me a look at your database. He goes, well, I don't have a database. And I said, well, that was crazy. So I said, you must have some emails somewhere. And he said, well, we've got a booking system and there's emails that are in that. So I actually got him to put all those emails into a spreadsheet, and we ran a program during COVID. And his business was actually, with his takeaway business, was running and turning over more money than it was pre-COVID. So that was something he was going to spend $15,000 to get new customers. And it was a tapas bar, so it's very hard to get people in and target people through that on social. So a lot of businesses really need to look at, overall, what's your asset, what's your opportunity, what are your partnership opportunities? And I'll give you an idea of partnership opportunities. I connected with 12,449 businesses last year in my courses. And I didn't spend $1 on marketing because I did it through councils by developing programs that actually help councils meet their economic development objectives. So you can do partnership strategies, and I can give you hundreds of examples of how I've done those with businesses, and you don't spend $1, and you get a very, very quick return. So I think a lot of businesses focus too much on, I'll just put that on social media, or I'll just create that content. And you really need to take a step back and look at all the other opportunities, because there's a lot. Especially on those database fronts where the customer has already used you, so they know the service, they know the product, and they're already educated most of the time. If they're still looking, well, hey, it's another opportunity, and it's an easy win as well because they're already educated. well, they're already qualified. I mean, at the end of the day too, that someone comes into your business, it's a big thing for someone to notice your business, become aware, connect, and actually then physically walk into your business, purchase a meal. That customer is highly qualified. And the thing is too, that customer usually didn't walk in on their own. They've walked in with a bunch of people that have gone to that restaurant. So I think we've got around about 600 off that database. So let's say there's around about 1,800 potentially customers or people that have been in that business. And if you can create some kind of reward incentive scheme to get those people to come back, that is your easiest way, your cheapest, your easiest way to get a result. And then on top of that, you start looking at social. But I always say too, social is always my second step, because the issue with social is, people are on there looking to be entertained. They're usually they're on social scrolling while they're waiting for a friend to come for a coffee. They're not engaged. They're not actually looking for anything. So you've got to kind of interrupt those people and use kind of infotainment to kind of get them to engage with your message, where on Google, people are actually literally looking for
a reason.
Firstly, look at your existing customers. Second, then get a Google strategy together. And third, a social media strategy.
Oh, that sounds great. What are some of the changes you've seen in the industry in your time?
A lot. It's crazy. It makes me sound old. But I actually started, believe it or not, as a hand and machine compositor by trade. And then basically that was really where they used to use typesetting, and they used to get actually like Ludlows and use lead traces and things. And not that I actually did that, but when I went to tech, it was at the end of that era. And I was lucky enough to work at Australian Consolidated Press, and I had a few people take me under their wing there, and I really moved into the advertising side, and then, moved out of there into the printing industry, and I had print management companies, and so I was heavily weighted on print. It wasn't probably about 5 or 6 years into me being in the industry that really web development started to come into play. But when I first started on computers, they weren't WYSIWYG computers like what you see is what you get. You actually had to type lines of code to draw boxes and to do design. You had to use film, and that was crazy. So it was really a completely different industry back then. But ironically, in terms of people and what you were trying to achieve, you had a different way of getting there. But what you were trying to achieve at the end of the day in terms of getting people to make a commitment or key messaging around people's challenges and things, that part of advertising has never changed. People are the same. The only difference with people now is they've got more choice and they're more distracted. So you have to be better. And so where digital is really, really good and it allows you to get to people really quickly, and it's a two-way interactive dialogue now, where print was a one-way and it took a long time to sort of get that feedback. Now you can get that really quick through analytics, but it's also a highly competitive marketplace now, and people are more dumbed down to messages, so you have to be sharper and you have to be better now than you used to be. It was a little bit easier back then. But then it also had its challenges in terms of it wasn't so interactive.
Do you find on that analytics side of things that it's a little bit easier in a sense as well, where people may have been buying a half-page ad in the newspaper to advertise but really didn't know their return because, hey, I might read it and the bloke next to me doesn't read it, where now
it's all hit and miss.
With things like Facebook advertising and that type of stuff, you can really direct your market to who's searching for what. And I know now that you jump on Google and look for something, and then 2 days later it flashes up into your news feed and things like that, where it follows you around until you actually buy.
Look, I think that is easier. I think you can get too caught up in analytics. I think a lot of people get caught up in click-through rates, and that's really great. And I had a conversation with a guy yesterday that, you've really got to make sure that your conversion strategy is great, because at the end of the day, first is your conversion strategy. Don't get caught up in click-through rates, because you can have a click-through rate. It's like filling. I could fill a bucket with water and more water and more water. If it's got holes in it, it's going to leak. So I'd rather have a smaller click-through rate and higher conversion. So I think that analytics, for me, I think they're great and they're a great tool as long as they're used in the right way and they're used sequentially in the process of elimination of what works. Because really in marketing, it's making assumptions and testing assumptions. That's what marketing is. And that is a lot easier now with analytics, and it is a lot easier with that two-way interactive. But I think some businesses I see get too caught up in, it's kind of almost like, back in the day when it was like measuring the likes that you had on your Instagram post and things like that, it was almost, it triggered the part of the brain really that gave people this pleasure that if they got a like, they'd post something and get a like, and it's almost addictive to do that. And I think analytics, you've just got to be careful that you don't get too caught up in the analytics, but you also get caught up in your physical conversions of the business. So Google's very much like the yellow pages. really.
Yeah, absolutely.
People went to
That's
Yellow
that's
Pages
the old
looking
days. The old days of that's the old Google, mate. Yellow Pages.
Yellow Pages.
Let
So
your
people went
fingers
onto Yellow
let your
Pages
fingers
to
do the walking.
Yeah, that's right. So, look, I think analytics are great. They're a great tool, but I think a lot of people get to the number one at Google, get a high click-through rate, and that is important. Don't get me wrong, high click-through rate is important, but if your conversion strategy is poor, you got a lot of wastage in terms of what you're doing. So, I sort of warn people about getting too caught up in those numbers, and.
Just for those younger listeners, the Yellow Pages are a phone book that used to get delivered to A to K and L to Z.
A to K, L to Z, yeah.
Were like two big bricks that if you were looking for any phone numbers, you'd have to go through and find them. So that's for our younger listeners.
They're still there, they're just on digital now.
Yeah.
I used to carry my early days in sales. I used to carry the Yellow Pages in my car. To call in on customers and so forth when I had time, like cold calls and that sort of stuff in the area, to look up addresses and companies and so forth, had their phone numbers and so forth. So I used to have the Yellow Pages in my car to go around and see clients. I know I'm the
street directory.
100. Yeah, the old street directory.
Next to the
right,
UBD.
mate. I know I don't look that old, but unfortunately, yeah, they were the days.
I remember being out at Homebush once and I was going to see a client and I couldn't find them. I had to pull into a service station and buy a physical street directory book.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yep.
And you'd be driving along, mate, and you'd
changed.
have driving along, you'd have one hand on the wheel and one hand on the directory trying to find which way you were going.
Yeah, that's probably more dangerous than it is today, to be honest.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The thing,
Yellow
just on
Pages in one hand and the street
Yeah, exactly. Right.
and eating a sandwich while you're driving along as well.
Yeah.
The one thing, just on the street directory, the one thing I didn't get is that you'd be on page 78 and you'd finish that page and then you'd have to go to page like 220. Why didn't they just flip over to page 78?
Well, if you were going east-west, that was okay because you just flip over the page. But when you're going north-south, well, you've got to flick down the... It's not that simple.
I'll just pump it into Google Maps.
You're before your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot easier. Should have made it like the Sydney Morning Herald. You could just fold it out. Remember they used to do that in the trains in the morning.
Yes.
Sit next to someone and it was papers out like that.
You'd have to hold one side and they'd hold the other and you'd read a page each.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the podcast. We have a word from our sponsor. KRGS Store's Security Mobile Trellis Barrier allows you to have a versatile trackless barrier at any length. Standing 2 meters in height and having no floor or head tracks eliminates any trip hazards or the need for bulkheads. Simply wheel the Security Mobile Trellis Barrier away when not needed. Perfectly suited when you need to prevent access to a certain section of the property, such as food courts or when parts of the shopping centre are closed. If you like more information, visit www.krgsstores.com.au or call 1800 897 822. Now back to the podcast.
As a young bloke, mate, because obviously our family and your family, we go back a long way. We've known each other for over 40 years. But as a young bloke, were you always one that wanted to get into advertising and marketing? Was that always your dream?
Not really. I wouldn't say that. I think that really I was creative as a kid. When I was at school, the art teacher sort of said that.
Yes.
The art teacher said to my parents that, look, Grant's very good at drawing and
you were
illustration.
correct.
You probably should go do some further education. So I actually went to tech at night and did visual art. And quite to my pleasure back then as a young man, I actually did a few course on nudes, which was actually good for a young fella at about 14 years of age. Until there was a guy. Until the one night a guy turned up, I had to draw him. I was over it by then. But so I did that, and that's actually how I got my job in an Australian Consolidated Press. I actually used to draw, believe it or not. I used to draw. If you remember back in the old days with Women's, I don't know if they still do it, Women's Weekly. I used to draw the pictures of the Mills and Boon style pictures that went behind the stories in Women's Weekly. But a funny thing happened one day. I got off the
How's
train.
that for a claim to fame? I used to do the drawings on the Mills and Boons in the Women's Day and the Women's Weekly.
Mills and Boon style sort of background pictures on the And it was funny. I got off the train one day and I saw this guy. He was a homeless guy and he was drawing on the pavement outside of Woolworths. It was back then out near Town Hall Station. And
Yep.
he was the best artist I reckon I've ever seen in terms of chalk, and he was broke.
Yeah?
And I went, hang on a minute. I thought, hang on a minute. Yeah, there's too many creative people in the world in terms of hand illustrated design and that kind of thing. But I went through that process because.
Were you concerned, mate, being an artist, you could end up on the street as well? Is that what you're?
Well, it didn't look good.
This is my future. This poor bastard's my future.
Yeah. Well, that's right. So I sort of started to look, and that sort of opened my eyes to look at other opportunities. But even though I went in as more of a graphic design aspect and formatting magazines, and I then moved very quickly into the advertising side. Back then, I was probably only 17, and I moved into advertising, and I think that really triggered my interest really in how can I make this ad work? Like, why does this ad work? And why doesn't this ad work? And the ads are almost identical. And we did this today in A/B split testing, is really understanding what is it that actually drives people to make a decision with this ad. Whereas if I can move this to here, or I can make that heading bigger, why is that got a 150 or 300% difference? So I think that really interests me, because I thought if you could crack that code, really it's a license to print money, because you're really, you're figuring out what makes people do what they do. And that takes you into the psychology of sales. It really takes you to understanding, how consumer behaviour is. And I've done a lot of study on that over the years. And I think I really found a passion in that.
Yeah, good.
And I think that's really driven. So whether or not it was whether I'm, developing a radio ad or a TV ad, or I'm developing something for a sales funnel, for me, it's really utilising and bringing those skills to the table to and that's why I always say it's H to H, always dealing with people. That's the common denominator in everything. It's just the platform is different.
Any famous TV ads that you've done, mate? Any brands?
Not really. I actually, believe it or not, I got involved with. I've done a lot of things over the years. It's crazy when you think about it. But I got involved with John Hartigan News Limited, and I came up with this idea. This is right back when.
You're not going to say Super League was your idea, were you?
No. So but that was before really webcams and streaming was really could be supported. But I started a thing called Footy Blogger. And I got Turvey, Stevie Mortimer, Mark Geyer, Steve Roach, Mario Fennick. I got basically a legend from every team, Robbie Kearns, Bradley Clyde. So a legend from every single club. And what I did is I gave them all webcams and set them up with cameras, and we did live streaming where we could actually record, their take on the games, if you will. And that was something that was really...
How long ago was that, mate?
That would have been about... that would be, mate, that'd be 10... I'm just trying to think. I was living up the road then. That would be 10, close to 12, probably 12 years ago.
This is before Zoom and podcast type thing. You're ahead of your time here. You're onto something.
Yes. So we developed that, and I actually ended up managing a lot of the players. So I got into actually talent management. I was at NRL player management for many years, but I didn't want to manage the players because they were too hard. And plus the percentage of management on player management, money's bigger, but the percentage is smaller with player management. But I got involved with managing media careers because I actually had contacts in the media. So I kind of actually was looking to get players coming out of their career and then getting them into coaching them into the media side of things. So I was doing that for a little while. But then obviously got back into doing this, and now I'm doing the coaching, which I really enjoy.
Good.
What's the biggest challenges you face, one as a business owner yourself, and then also in your industry?
I think one of the biggest challenges I think that you have, I think business is challenging, marketing is challenging, everything's a challenge, and I think that's if you're either driven by a challenge or you're put off by it. But I think that everything is challenging. I think that it's challenging to keep up with where things are going. And I think that really the issue is that if you don't keep up with it, it changes so quickly, even though, and I think a lot of businesses make a career out of this, they're selling older tactics or older things. They're selling platforms. They've got legacy platforms for web. They might have a web development template that if that's any more than 12 months old, it's probably too old, too slow, it's outdated, but they can't continually update it because it's going to cost them more money than they're making. So I think that really staying ahead of how quickly it's moving, particularly with AI, running a family. I'm a single dad with 3 boys, and I have been for 10 years. So that's trying to do that as a family, staying on top of everything, and obviously too trying to do the best for your customers is a challenge in an environment that's changing very quickly. But I think if you don't stay on top of things, you're really ultimately selling solutions to people that really are outdated. So I think staying abreast of things and staying on top of things is a challenge, but I love it. So I enjoy it. So it's a challenge, but it's a good one.
And I guess that also comes back to educating yourself. I saw a thing the other day, about 10 years ago, they showed all these logos of companies that weren't even around, and it was big known companies, that the Instagrams and things like that. And in your space, you'd have to learn or educate yourself on all those things that are upcoming in case a client has an interest in that side of thing as well.
Yeah, I think particularly in the education side, because you have to be across everything from really going, as I say, into AI, but virtual reality was a thing that was really taking off with Google, and that's kind of slowed a little bit. But obviously the integration of those two will come together. But yeah, I sort of am lucky in the context, and that was one of the reasons why I decided not to have an internal team as such in development, because what I can do is have virtual teams where I can bring in experts in all areas. Because if anybody tells you, and this is one of the big problems in the industry, is if anyone tells you they're great at everything, they're telling lies, because you can't be. You can't specialise in every single area if you're producing it and doing it as well, because it's moving too fast. So if you specialise in everything, you specialise in nothing as such. So I think that really, I'm lucky on the education side, because it does allow me to put a lot of research into technology that's evolving, and also how it's practically can be applied to particularly small businesses where I'm educating. But if I was involved in the production side, there's no way in the world that I could stay on top of everything. So that's why I kind of made the decision as well to outsource and bring in specialists in areas that I trusted, in all areas, from chatbots, AI to video production, to content creation, platform integration, data security, data migration. So all of these experts in the area who are specialising in their specific fields and do have time to really work in those verticals and become very good at them. And when you bring those teams together on a need-to basis under some project, the customer gets a better result at the end, and it frees you up with your time to really research and network with people who are in multiple areas and really expand your knowledge. So that's worked out very well for me, and it's actually great because I've learned a lot, particularly over the last 5 years, by being able to free myself up to get more involved, get my hands across more things or more areas of the industry.
How do you advertise to your clients then? Is it repeat business, or is it word of mouth?
Well, for me, there's a lot of work. One of the people used to say to me, "Why don't you advertise?" And if you're in advertising, why don't you advertise? Particularly in broad advertising, because there's a lot of work I don't want. There's specific work that you do want, and there's work that you don't want. And the thing is, if you advertise broadly, I always say, if you advertise to everyone, you're really targeting nobody. So the way I kind of operate, particularly it's evolved for me really in now, because I'm in education, is that I use lead magnets, and I give away a lot of information to get people to register to come into my courses or free webinars, and I build really a community that sits behind that. So Drew, you came to my webinar the other day, so you're basically in that community now. So I'm a hunter, but I'm also very strong in farming. So what I'll do is I'll actually then, rather than me posting a lot of stuff on social media, I post just enough to sort of say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do.
Just to lure them in.
Invest most of my... Well, yeah, just I guess you build authority. People have got to trust that you know what you're talking about. So put content up, but you can overdo that. And I think that really, I've got a database of over 50,000 people that have gone through different programs that I've done. So what I do is I actually then add more value to that community and build my brand and reputation and trust and add value into that community. So if anyone comes through my training programs, I'm committed to adding more value into that community, but I'm also obviously out there bringing more people into the community. But the main way that I do it is I do it through partnerships. So really strong in the local government area. So I do a lot of training programs for local government. But what I do is I identify how I can tailor an education program to actually help local government meet their economic objectives. So their economic objectives are to help and support small business in certain areas. So I develop advertising campaigns, courses that are specific to them meeting their objectives. And if I worked with a web development company, there's a web development company that I partner with, they've got over 6,000 customers on their database. I develop a webinar that is specific around platform structure and platform development integration. And that they are happy to promote my webinar, because what it does is it kind of gets the juices flowing for their customers to see what's possible, and it hopefully generates some opportunities for them and also too for their customers to bring on more customers of their own. So really developing packages with partnerships. I'm big on alliances and partnerships, and I kind of always look for ways that I can network and partner with companies that have established trusted networks, because why recreate it? Why go out there and try and say, hey, my name's Grant, this is who I am, and then try and start that from scratch, although you have to do that. But why not go in and be referred to by companies that have 10, 20, 30,000 people on their database? Because they've already built trusted networks. So it's really, really easy to leverage that. It's cheap and it's super fast. So the idea that if you build a database, and I always say to people, build your database really big. Don't forget the people in your database. Build value with it, add value, help them, and really build your brand and build trust. And then those people eventually will come back through your programs as well. So I think a lot of people forget that, but I think partner networks are really the forgotten strategy, because everyone's so focused, I guess, on developing the next piece of content and putting it on social media. So I think they get long forgotten, but they're highly effective. So 90% of what I do is through partner networks and partnerships. But any business, believe it or not, can do that. I mean, I think I mentioned, Drew, in that webinar, as I did that with a nursery.
Yes.
And we developed certain content that was valuable to real estate agents, and it was over 100,000, got it in front of 100,000 people every month for $0. So you've just got to be creative in the way that you approach things. But there's opportunities everywhere if you kind of step back and take some focus off things that you may be a bit too fixated on.
Just on that nursery one, I believe the story is that the owner of the nursery went to a handful of local real estate agents and said, hey, if I put together some education videos on what's the best plants to plant in your area, and you can do this and you can do that, and then the real estate agent actually sent it out to their database, which in turn was offering value to their customers, and then those customers then went back to the nursery to buy plants because they said, oh, that's a great idea, let's do that.
I do a lot of work with real estate agents, so I understand, and this is the emphasis of really understanding people, or understanding who your target audience is. And one of the things I do when I sit with a business, and it's the boring part, I guess, but it's the most important part, is it's about strategy. It's about we create customer avatars, or some people call them personas. We do customer journeys. We really map out what we're going to do. And because I already understood the real estate industry, I know what they're looking to do. They're obviously looking to get people to get evaluations on their homes, or get their homes valued. That's why you always get those things in your letterbox. So they're trying to get people in that mode of thinking, I wonder what my property's worth now. So that's one thing they're trying to achieve. And another thing that real estate agents are starved for content that is actually of value to their target audience. So my idea was, let's come up with a very simple series about how planting a garden or a rockery and landscaping your house and cost-effective ways to do that can actually add tens of thousands of dollars to your home. So that kind of content is very, very attractive to real estate agents, because what it does is when they're posting that content, it's putting their target audience into that mode of thinking, okay, hang on a minute, I wonder what my property would be worth. So the real estate agent's getting that person to flick into that mindset, but also, too, they're looking to put that content out there, and it's getting the nursery that exposure. So there's a value on both sides. So as I said before, too, with the councils, you've really got to create content that is of value to somebody else that has a target audience that you want to access. And when you start to think and ask yourself the right questions, the answers come very easily. So any business can do partnership strategies. You've just got to be creative enough to find value for the person who is the key influence to go out to your target audience. And the gates just open up for you when you do that. And I found that concept and started to implement that around about 10 years ago. And, I do marketing online, but it's my main focus is through partnerships, because it's massive. It's like you have a database and then someone else has a database, and then you can just access that straight away. It's gold. And when you get to a database of around 50,000 plus, you can start doing arrangements or deals or partnerships with companies that have 20,000, 30,000. You can get double the exposure very, very quickly, because you have an asset that you can basically bring to the table to negotiate with. So it's when you start getting into that area, it's very, very powerful. But you just have to have a creative spin on it.
It is a good tool.
Mate, away from work, how do you relax?
I work all the time at the moment, because we're building a new programs. But I really like the water. I love the water. So really fishing, skiing, anything on the water, basically. On the water, in the water, I love it. I've got a boat shed down the back too. Sometimes I actually take the studio down there and put it in the boat shed, so I'm close to the water, but I'm just too busy to go in it at the moment.
Temperature's probably not right either, mate, at the moment, to be honest.
No, probably not. It's getting a bit cold. I do like it warm, actually, the water. Yeah, it's a bit cold at the moment.
Now, to wrap up the podcast, mate, we ask our fast 5 questions, which is just rapid fire to get to know you a little bit better. What would be your last meal?
My last meal would probably be either a baked dinner or fettuccine bosciola, actually. Either or.
Can't go wrong with the old baked dinner, mate. What's your favourite with the baked dinner? Lamb, beef?
Mum's baked dinners. Mum's baked dinners are the best. But yeah, lamb's good. Any baked dinner, but Mum does the best baked dinner. I've tried to replicate that and have been unsuccessful.
I think it's just a mum thing, mate. All mum's baked dinners are pretty good.
Pretty good. I think any baked dinner you don't cook to is better than the one.
Yeah, 100%. Takes so long to prepare and then goes in. You eat it in 15 minutes.
Especially with my boys, probably eat it in about 5 seconds.
Yeah. Inhale it.
Yeah.
Your drink of choice?
This is going to be boring, but water. Pretty much. Yeah. Not a drinker.
Haven't had water?
No, that's
a newbie. That's a newbie. We haven't had that one.
Who is your favourite superhero and why?
Superhero? Just a hard one. I don't really know. I think I've met a few superheroes. I think that I've met a lot of people actually in some of those helping those underprivileged kids. I'd probably have to say them again. That's probably not what you're looking for, but I don't think I really, apart from Superman and Batman, and I don't really watch TV, so I don't really know many superheroes.
No, that does make sense. They're, as they say, not all heroes wear capes. Yeah, there's a new one out every week. You can't keep up.
Marvel series or something? I haven't seen that.
Well, this next question, if you don't watch telly, it might be irrelevant. What is your favourite movie?
Favourite movie?
This will be old school. This will be old school if he's not watching TV now.
Pulp Fiction was good. I don't know. Yeah, I'm pretty boring with the movies. Actually, my partner, she says all these people who are famous. I've got no idea about famous people because I don't watch TV and I don't really watch movies. So I don't really know. But yeah, I enjoyed Pulp Fiction. That's probably the last movie I've watched. It's scary.
That is a good movie, Pulp Fiction.
Told you to be old school.
Yeah.
And finally, if heaven does exist, what would God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
What would he say? I warned you.
Give you a warning.
Have I got time for a quick joke?
Yes.
Yes, mate, absolutely. 100%.
There was a. This is probably this is probably my answer to the question. There was a priest, and he was in a town, and it was in a gully, and up on the mountains was where the dam was, and the dam burst, and it started flooding the valley and started flooding the village, and the water started to rise, and the priest was standing up on the balcony of the church, and a boat went past and said, they said, "Get in, Father, and save yourself. The floodwaters are coming and you'll drown." He said, "No." He said, "I've got faith in the good Lord. The good Lord will save me." And the boat went on. And then the next thing, he's standing up on the roof, and another boat comes past, and he says, they say, "Get in, Father, and save yourself. You're going to die. You're going to drown." And he said, No. I have faith that the good Lord will save me." So the boat went on. Next thing, he's right up on the steeple, and the floodwaters engulf the whole town. And the third boat comes along and says, "Get in, Father, and save yourself." He said, "You're the last person left." He said, No, I got faith in the good Lord. The good Lord will save me." Next thing you know, the whole place was flooded. The priest drowned. Standing at the pearly gates of heaven, God came out, and the priest said, "I don't understand why you didn't save me, God." He goes, "I had faith in you. I thought the good Lord would save me." He said, "Well, I did send 3 boats,
That's true.
So that would probably describe it.
Yes.
Eh?
That's true, buddy. That's
I did
good.
send 3 boats.
Hey, mate, thanks for coming on the podcast and having a chat. Good to good to catch up and tell us what you're doing. And for anyone that is in a small business, you need to talk to Grant Hartley and get him involved in your company, Brand Local, in regarding his advertising and marketing ideas. He is a guru, and if you want to succeed in small business, you need to get him involved with yours. So, mate, well done. Congratulations on what you're doing. Good luck with what continuing to do. And, mate, it's great to catch up and have a chat and come on to the KRGS Doors podcast.
Good on you. Good to see us.
You too, mate. And for those listening, it can be found Grant at brandlocal.com. There's a lot of free stuff on his website. You can even book a free strategy session with Grant to get the wheels in motion, and there's some free webinars and information there that you can start to learn and improve your business. Thank you very much, Grant. Thanks again for your time, mate.
Good on you.
Good to talk,
Thanks,
mate.
boys.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
That wraps up the 32nd episode and our chat with Grant Hartley from Brand Local. For more information on Brand Local, you can visit their website, www.brandlocal.com, and check out their live webinars on mastering Google and marketing strategy, or see how Grant and his team can help your business. If you have missed any previous episodes of the KRGS Doors podcast, you can download them from our website, www.krgsdoors.com.au/podcast, or on your favourite podcast player, search KRGS Doors. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. This also boosts our ranking and my ego. The other thing I suggest, if you've enjoyed the podcast, visit your favourite podcast player and leave a review or a rating. On our next episode, we speak to Greg Robinson from the band The Valleys, a tribute to Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Greg was also a member of the Little Bandits crew that won the 2012 season of the TV show Young Talent Time. Greg has also sung and danced at Woolworths Carols in the Domain for over 15 years and has performed at the New South Wales Premier's Christmas Concert, the 2015 Netball World Cup, Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Award, and in Disneyland, USA. His story is quite entertaining on how he got to where he is today, so keep your eyes peeled for that upcoming episode. I've been your host, Drew Blackman, and you've been fantastic for tuning in today. As always, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. Thanks. Till next time. The KRGS Doors Show, proudly brought to you by KRGS Doors. For all your shopfront roller shutters, roller grills, folding closures and bifold doors, visit www.krgsdoors.com.au.